I think we're ready to get rolling and talk about what we're going to accomplish today. So you all will see the three main questions on the slide. How does your culture support strategy activation? What challenges within your culture prevent strategy from being implemented? And where can you focus to improve your employee engagement? So spoiler alert, we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between culture and engagement as the conversation goes on. So I think it's pretty straightforward. Let's roll right into it. We want to hear from you guys. What is culture? And we had kind of joked a little bit. There was some millennials on our team and Gen Zs. I think that those are the folks after us. And they thought we were talking about Cardi B's daughter, culture with a K, and we said no, we mean culture with a C, corporate culture. So Keith says it's how things get done around here. Yeah, I think that's a lot of the times what we end up saying is kind of how we do stuff, right? I think at Root we like to talk about culture related to our values and how we show up. The environment your people and leaders create. Yep, I love that. Our underlying company beliefs. How people feel at work. Ooh, that one is really interesting. I like that. Amy, what would you say culture means to you?
Culture means a lot of different things. I think depending on the organization, culture can be, the way that we think about culture, the way that we define culture is really broad. And I would suggest that there's not really any one way that we can visualize it. At Root, we like to think about how do we visualize things? How do we put that and make that picture really come to life? But when we think about culture, there are so many different ways that people are thinking about it, that people are really looking to identify with it. So there's not a right way to visualize it, but really it's more about, my opinion, our opinion is really more about how are you defining culture within your own organization. And so I think that's one of the things that we love to hear from you now. So how are you defining culture at your organization? There's a lot of different ways that people are defining it, certainly.
Yeah, and even some of the different responses we got was similar characteristics of a group or then the historical artifacts surrounding how the employees interact with the company. And I do feel like, to Amy's point, culture and company culture is so personal to that organization, and it's so much rooted in that history of how maybe that organization was founded, the purpose of the organization, and again, I think someone I mentioned, how we show up, how do we do things around here. So it is very specific. So we're curious about, how does your organization define the culture, and what does that mean that's uniquely yours?
Not just stating a culture, but our actions are supporting it. I think that is something that we hear from clients quite often in terms of how they're defining culture. I feel, and I'm scrolling past me quickly, somebody mentioned earlier, culture is how things get done around here. I think that's another thing that we hear quite often, right? It's just the way we work, right? And oftentimes what we're hearing from clients is that it is the way we work, it's how we work, it's why we work. Those are the different ways that people are looking to really define culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So I really want to talk about kind of culture versus engagement here, and I had said a few minutes ago that we were going to talk about both of them. So what's really interesting is I think we use both of these words interchangeably. We also know that we have employee engagement surveys, but we don't necessarily have culture surveys. So engagement is really like the output of the culture. It's how people kind of manifest, how they are attached to it, and how they are exhibiting it. So I think it's really interesting when we kind of talk about them as two separate entities, but we do want to kind of talk about what is your culture, how is it defined at your organization, and then how are people showing up and manifesting it. So we just wanted to call it out because we are going to kind of talk about engagement as well as culture, and we want to kind of share that with you. So what's also really interesting is we've taken a look at kind of progress that the United States has had over the past 30 years, And you'll see here, traffic-related deaths have gone down 35%. We've put a lot of focus into click it or ticket. You guys have seen things like that. Cancer death rates have decreased by 26%. Same thing, we've put a lot of focus into it. I think there's a lot of nonprofits. Amy could probably tell us more about that in terms of focus and research that has happened and, you know, medical kind of marvels that have happened with cancer. And we have zero change in employee engagement, which I think is really weird, especially because Root has been around for about 30 years, and I think we're trying to preach the importance of having a really supportive culture and engaging your people in that. So that's sort of stressful that we have this 0% change in employee engagement. It says 70% of people are sleepwalking. When we look at the Gallup scores, we know that there's only 30% of people that are tagged as engaged, so or actively engaged in their organization. So I'm just curious, like, does this surprise anybody? What do you think? I don't know, Amy. This sort of is a little stressful to me. How does this make you feel?
Well, I do think, I mean, I think that the connection that we're making between the fact that knowing that engagement is the result of a really strong culture and knowing that employee engagement hasn't really changed at all and that 70% of people are feeling detached, they're sleepwalking through their jobs, I do think that it's a really startling, is perhaps that first adjective that comes to mind for me this morning, but I think it really also addresses the importance of the work that we're doing and why these types of conversations and really getting to the bottom of how culture is impacting your strategy and how you can really improve and drive into a space for culture is really critically important.
Yeah.
I'm seeing some comments. It's disappointing from Daphne, disappointing that with all of the efforts to engage employees, we're not moving the needle. We agree with you, Daphne. And we're hoping that creating conversations like this can really help to start move that needle a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, and I love that Keith says that engagement is a personal choice and the culture has to enable culture. So Keith is not a plant. We are going to talk actually really closely about this and what do we see as kind of the four main portions to really create this enabled, this cultural, this engagement-enabled culture. Woo, I'm having a hard time this morning. I think I need to drink more of my coffee. So Root, like I said, has been around for 30 years, and we've really been founded in this place of invigorating the power of human beings to make a difference. And so this directly relates to the culture and bringing that culture out through the engagement of your organization. And we know and have found that there are four fundamental components that need to be within your organizational culture to really maximize that engagement. So I'd love to unpack them. Amy, do you want to take us to the first one?
Yeah, so first of all, what we know at the core is that people really want to go on a meaningful journey. People who have meaning and purpose in their lives live 7 to 8 years longer than people that don't. So I just want everyone to digest that for a second. People who have meaning and purpose in their lives live 7 to 8 years longer than people who don't. And since most of our life is spent at work, we really feel that it's critically important that we bring a sense of purpose, that we bring a sense of meaning to the work that we're doing, especially if that is going to help us live longer, right? But it's really critical that we're thinking about how we're creating an environment, driving a culture that allows for our teams and our people to go on a journey. It's the first most important component that we've identified.
So people they want to go on a meaningful journey. I think the second component is that people want to feel a sense of belonging. And we know right now that 40% of employees do not understand the company's vision. So we need people that feel that they belong to your organization, but then a good chunk of your employees don't understand that vision. And that vision is really like the purpose, and that's something that they can anchor onto. So if they don't understand the vision, how do they feel like they're going to belong? So they can't connect how their work supports the vision if they don't understand it. So we're sort of in this, we know what they need to do, but we're kind of in a struggle here. We just got a great comment. Sorry, go ahead, Amy.
No, you read it. Go ahead.
I feel like I'm spending much time with my team talking through their meaning and belonging with their company, helping them find their niche. So, yeah, I think we have some personal experience with that. Sorry, I interrupted you, I think, talking about number 3.
I was going to start talking about 3. So the third root of engagement that we've identified is the need for people to feel that they're part of something bigger than themselves. 4 in 10 U.S. employees strongly agree that the mission or purpose of their company makes them feel that their job is important. People really want to know that the work that they're doing is important. But when you think about that, there's 40% of people who don't really understand the mission, and yet 40% of people are agreeing that the mission is what makes them feel that their work is really important. So there's a really huge opportunity for us to start to bridge that gap by really driving into some of this idea around how we build really strong roots that bring people and connect them to our culture at large.
Yeah, and then the final piece is that employees need to know that their contributions make a significant impact or difference in the lives of other human beings. Only 1 in 5 employees feels that their performance is managed in a way that motivates them to do outstanding work. So I just feel that this is kind of an interesting story that we've heard. We've heard that only 60% of employees on average understand the vision of their organization. Then we heard that 40% actually agree that that mission or that purpose helps them feel that they do important work. And now only 20 actually feel like they're managed in such a way that they know that they're even motivated or care enough to do that great work. So we're like losing people along the way in our journey. So I think it's really up to us as leaders in our organization to capture those folks and make them, help them understand that sense of belonging, how they're a part of something bigger, how they connect and contribute to that. And then we know that managers are kind of that linchpin in organizations. So how do we empower them to really coach people in a way that helps them understand how they connect and contribute, and they feel that sense of meaning and journey. Sorry, I've been talking, and we have a question.
So the question is, do you find this in all companies regardless of whether they are mission-driven or not?
So all of these stats are actually an aggregate from like North American companies alone, so it does not discriminate against whether or not they're mission-driven or not. I think we see a tiny little bit of uptick when folks are mission-driven, but unfortunately we're not really seeing anything that's like statistically significant. But it would be an interesting study to do to sort of like dive deeper into that.
I'd love to do just an informal study, though, right now on the phone. So for those of you that are with us, when you look at these roots of engagement, do you feel in your job, right, do you feel like you are in a space where you're on a meaningful journey? Do you feel a sense of belonging and understanding to your company's mission? Do you feel like you are part of something bigger than yourself? And do you feel like you know and understand how your contributions are making an impact in your organization? Just like a fast round robin down there in terms of who has this job, where is the dream job, and is your organization building a culture that really feels this way for you? I'm just curious.
We are a mission-driven org who has lost its focus through recent acquisitions who haven't picked up on that mission yet. Yeah, so, you know, we also see there are certain professions that I think have like an intrinsic calling. We do a lot of work in healthcare, and I think people, they really feel like they have this purpose to have great patient care and really impact these people's lives. What we have seen is that a poor organizational culture and structure can kind of erode that passion over time. So you need to really make sure that you are kind of tapping into people and their purpose and why they really have chosen that profession. That's an easy kind of parallel to draw because we see that a lot in healthcare professionals, but I think it's really important for all organizations to really focus in on why do you exist and what that purpose is. We're focused on culture, however, we can't seem to break free from ourselves and how we operate. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people fall victim to that. We might also fall victim to that. I'm really loving the comments, so keep them going. So I think just to sum up in terms of the roots of engagement, I'm sure you guys have all heard that culture eats strategy for lunch, but these are the pieces of why we see organizations kind of constantly getting eroded by a poor organizational culture. If you don't have these things in place, your culture is just going to like chew up and spit out anything you're trying to do. Strategy, change, everybody's going through a digital transformation right now. Folks will be resistant to new technology adoption. So I think we really want to build that really strong foundation of a culture in order to drive engagement and adoption of any changes. Amy, anything you would like add here or change?
No, well, actually what I was thinking to myself, which has not anything to do with necessarily culture at this particular moment, except that we kind of opened with the idea that we had some team members that were thinking about culture with a K. And I'm looking now at this slide going, oh my gosh, this is a head nod, right, to a whole nother generation. So I'm wondering, you know, there's connectedness that starts to reflect. That's also part of our, I think our culture here is the ability and opportunity to kind of really play on who we are and to let that come through in our work. But I just thought, I was kind of laughing to myself going, I wonder if everybody knows Pac-Man.
Oh my gosh, I hope so. I have a story about Pac-Man. We'll talk about that later, though. But so funny. So
that being said, what are some of the challenges in your culture that are preventing your strategy from being implemented? We heard a little bit from Keith around we can't really break free from how we're operating, and so that can certainly be a challenge. What are some of the other things that you need to overcome? What are some of the things that are preventing that strategy from being implemented successfully when you think about your culture?
Yeah, we also heard a little bit from Rex about the acquisitions. So I think that's a really interesting and commonplace that we hear a lot of that culture kind of being eroded or maybe not as strong when you're growing through acquisition or mergers. Clearly articulating goals and objectives for employees. Yeah, definitely. Amy, do you have any stories that you want to share here about some of the work you've been doing for some of the organizations?
Well, we have lots of stories. I think what I'd love to share are just some of the bigger themes, right? Like we really are hearing from our clients that there's a need to help them think through how do we create cultures where we allow people to be curious? How do we drive conversation where we're really letting people think outside of the box, where we're being innovative, where we're giving permission to take risks, which will also feed into innovation. So, and then also how do we recognize people? It's not really about reward anymore. It's really about how do we provide recognition. And in some of these spaces, what we're hearing is we want to drive curiosity. We want people to be innovative. We don't want them to be afraid of taking risks. And when they fail, we actually want to recognize the work that they've done. And, you know, there's appreciation for that perspective and the voice that's coming in through that particular lens when we're looking at strategy. So I think that that's a theme that I'm hearing in a lot of the work that we are doing right now. I'm also seeing in the chat training, don't micromanage. Everyone not focused on the end mission or customer. Everyone having their own understanding and meaning to this strategy. That never happens, right? We never. There's only one way to interpret strategy, and I'm kidding. I think that's one of the big challenges that we know we have to overcome is creating a perspective and a shared understanding around what that strategy is, and hearing that voice really clear and communicating that.
We don't have a unified story which disrupts our strategy and culture. Yeah, I think this one we see a lot, and we'll actually be talking about this in our session in January. So when we talk a lot about the story of your organization, what are your leaders saying? Are they saying the same things? Are they talking about the same things? Are they making the same choices? I think that is something that sort of like grounds people in the organization's culture as well as the strategy and those choices that you make. So yeah, definitely something that we see a lot.
I want to be cognizant of time, and so as we're wrapping up, I think the one last thing that I'd love to hear from some of you that are joining us today is, where do you think you can focus that will help to improve your employee engagement? If engagement is the result of a strong culture, what are things that you think you can focus on that will really drive and improve employee engagement at your organization? Love to see some of the responses and thoughts to that. Sarah, when you're working with clients, what are some of the areas or ideas that you hear that they have that helps to get this done?
Yeah, I really feel like this is something where it is more accountability, and I'm so sorry, it's Christmas time, and we just had someone drop off a package, and here's my dog in the background, so real time, guys. I think there's accountability, and I think that there's also really empowering that manager group or those people leaders in your organization to help have that conversation and constantly remind people and engage people in, this is what you do every single day that connects and contributes to the vision of the organization, the strategy of the organization, and kind of help refocus folks about that feeling that they are a part of something bigger, and that sense of importance, I think is, it's really hard to discount that, and I just think it's super important that a lot of folks like us to focus on. Oh, look at managers are key. We heard from Nicole.
Managers are key. Managers can succeed because of their leaders or in spite of their leaders. Agree, same, the managers and next level leaders, also helping the front line feel connected. And I think that is one of the key things that we're focused on when we think about strategy activation is how do we connect? How do we allow the front line to connect to the strategy and to see their role in the strategy? And so that happens not only through communicating, it happens not only through being really clear in what the strategy is and how we're telling that story, but also in driving and building a culture that allows people to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. So I love that was dropped in. What I didn't mention in the early part of this webinar is that I used to be an English teacher, and so in the spirit of homework, what we would really love for all of you to do is to think about what's one thing you can do to change your culture or to improve your employee engagement. You don't have to tell us now, or you can, but we would also love for you to engage with us on LinkedIn. So after our last webinar, we created a hashtag rooting for change. That's what Sarah and I are doing. And in this space of thinking around strategy activation, we'd love to hear from some of you in the next few minutes, in the next few hours, in the next few days, in terms of what is it that you think you can do that is really going to change your culture, that's going to improve your employee engagement. If you have an awesome idea, we might need to talk to you and figure out how we can leverage that too. We're always we love to learn and to hear about the things that other people are doing that's really powerful and that's working. So please feel free to share that with us in the coming minutes and hours.
Yes, and I'm so excited to hear what people say and what they commit to. I do want to call out, we had a few folks mention that they are focused on measuring opportunities and developing action plans and employee development. One of the things that's super interesting that we've seen is traditionally people used to leave organizations, or they used to say that they left organizations based on bad managers. Now what we're seeing, I joked about millennials earlier, but now what we're seeing is that millennials love this feeling of progression, and they love feedback, and they love to see how their career is accelerating, if you will. So if you have a lack of promotion opportunities or development and skill building opportunities, they will actually leave your organization because they can't see that clear line of progression. So I think it's super interesting and really, really great to kind of focus in on that, on skill development, skills of the future, all of those things as kind of part of your culture and that talent development. So I love hearing that. But like Amy said, we're really excited to hear what you guys are going to be doing to improve your culture or your employee engagement. tag us with that hashtag on LinkedIn, or heck, if you want to use other social media platforms too, we're fine with that. And we would absolutely love you all to come back and join us for our conversation in January in the new decade. Pretty excited that 2020 is fast approaching. So
I'm also really excited. I do want to be cognizant of time. So we are at time for today. Sarah and I are going to stay on and do some Q&A with those of you that are able to stay on with us. This is also recorded, so in the event you have to drop off, but you're really curious about how this conversation continues. After, like, what is that called? After the mic stops, or there's a really cool term for that. You have to know what it is, Sarah, right? Anyway, we're going to keep recording, so questions and conversation, you'll be able to access it later. If you can hang out, we're going to keep talking for a few more minutes. If you have to go, thank you so much for joining us today. You can always reach Sarah and I. We'll share our contact information here. We'd love to connect with you. Even if it doesn't pertain necessarily to culture, we're happy to talk about anything that is impacting strategy at your organization. So feel free to reach out, and we'll continue that conversation with you one-on-one. Anything you would add, Sarah?
No, I think we're really excited, like I said, to continue the conversation and to talk more specifics around your culture and how it's being brought to life in your organization. As we mentioned earlier, it is so specific to you and your workforce that we don't want to be prescriptive about what exactly your culture should be, but rather what are those components that we've seen throughout all organizational cultures that really enable that organization to be successful. So we'd love to continue the conversation about you and your culture specifically.
Sarah, I'm seeing a question down here. I want to read it out so that we have an opportunity to respond. With more millennials beginning to lead in the workplace, we're feeling culture shifts in our own organization. Some are positive, some are creating tension. How do we address this shift and our need to align culture and strategy? Great question. What are some of your thoughts around that, Sarah?
This one is really interesting, and I feel like this goes back to what we had talked about earlier with the leaders and with the managers in your organization. I think understanding and aligning your leadership team on what is that culture we're trying to drive for, what is authentic to us, what honors our past and sort of helps propel us into the future is really going to be the best place to start. We have seen organizations that try to outsource their culture to culture teams. Where we see the most success is when the leadership team owns it. So with more millennials beginning to lead in that organization, I think it's important for them to have that voice and that cohesiveness and that alignment around what does it look like for us to be in the future and how are we sort of going to be demonstrating our values maybe in different ways. Amy, do you have any different thoughts, or what do you think about that?
I just think one of the really unique things that I have seen a couple of clients do just in the past 6 months as they've been rolling out strategy is to partner, right, and to put together some of their legacy team members, if you will, with some of the younger team members that are coming in place. They're working in the same department. They have really different perspectives on how work should be done, on what the company should be doing, on what's really important. And ultimately, in putting them together, what they're finding is that there's a lot of value in those shared perspectives and in giving people the opportunity to really work and understand what some of the significance of the history and the legacy and the tenured workers bring in with some of the maybe the newer shifts and the different kinds of thinking that the younger workforce is bringing in addition to some of the one of the companies I was working with was a technology company, so there was just kind of this skill set of this is how we're working, this is how the technology really comes to life, and they were able to actually be great mentors in terms of how do you use this alongside of how does it impact our business at large, which was a perspective that the newer employees didn't necessarily have. So I think that there's some really unique ways that clients are looking to overcome this and to really kind of accelerate how this shift is occurring and how they can tackle it in the workplace. So great question. You really cool things that we can do around that. Question from
Stephanie asked,
Go ahead, sir.
Yep, sorry. What are some things you do at Root to create a cohesive and positive work culture for your organization? So Amy, do you want to talk about that from your perspective, being at the home office today?
There's a long list. I think one of the really unique things and the things that I love about Root is the idea that there are never any bad ideas. And everybody is invited to bring an idea to the table. So our teams are very across all departments. We really look to leverage input from people that maybe are not directly connected as content experts, but have other unique perspectives to share. And I really think that when we are sitting around the table, there's no hierarchy of opinion, right? Everybody has an equal voice at that table. And to me, that's one of the really unique pieces of how Root tackles and works to overcome some of those challenges. So it's one of my favorite things. Not to mention some of the really cool decorations and the way that we're driving into the holiday season with our monthly all-company meetings. We had some great food, great fun. We don't really take ourselves too seriously around here, so we're always looking at how we can engage and create a workspace that is fun for people. We want people to want to be here. I want to be here.
Yeah.
You want to be here, Sarah?
Yeah, so Amy's really highlighting fun is actually one of our values, which I think is awesome. And I think that something that we always do is we always kind of anchor folks in our purpose. And our purpose is, as I mentioned before, invigorating the power of human beings to make a difference. You hear a lot of folks talk about that as sort of an anchor in terms of their decision making. Another one of our values is like client fanaticism. And I think, again, that's sort of another anchor in our decision making always, which is, are we behaving like client fanatics if we make this choice? Is this in the spirit of being a client fanatic? And so I think when you look at Root and you look at the different things we do, a lot of the values that we have sort of anchor the choices that we make, either as in-tech teams or as leadership teams. So I think that that's something that we really see how it becomes pervasive and how we all show up, which I think is really, it's authentic and it's important to us. Hopefully you guys can all feel that when you work with us.
Yes. Great question. Thank you, guys.
Yes. So we don't want to keep you guys much longer, and I think some folks have popped off as we have continued to talk, but we appreciate you all staying with us and asking questions. As Amy and I said, we're here to chat. We're here to check specifics with you, and we'd love to hear again on LinkedIn using that Rooting for Change hashtag about how you are going to impact your culture and impact your employee engagement. So thank you again for joining us. Hopefully this was a nice, invigorating reprieve from your busy end of year work, and we would love to chat with you for the remainder of the year and into the new decade. So thanks so much.